All right, today we're tackling something big. We're going to piece together this incredibly complex puzzle, a whole series of events that are all connected, and they're putting our global systems under some serious pressure. We're talking about everything from geopolitics to the global economy. So let's dive right in.
Now, to really get a handle on this, we're going to do things a bit differently today. Think of this as a live intelligence briefing, coming to you from the very near future. The date is April 12th, 2026, and what you're about to hear is an analysis of the huge events that are unfolding right now.
Okay, so where does it all start? Well, it begins with the first domino to fall, a really fragile truce in the Middle East. You see, there was a recent ceasefire that was supposed to cool things down, but now a localized conflict is threatening to unravel the whole thing. And on the ground in Lebanon, things have gotten bad, fast. International monitors are using the strongest language they possibly can. They're calling it a humanitarian catastrophe. And you have to understand, this isn't some distant conflict. It's a full-blown crisis. And the human cost is very, very real. And that cost? Well, it just keeps climbing. The death toll from these recent localized strikes has now topped 254. And every single one of those numbers, that's a life. It's escalating the stakes for everyone involved. The crisis, of course, doesn't stop at the conflict zone. The number of people displaced across the region has now ballooned to over 1.3 million. I mean, that is a massive wave of humanity on the move, and it's putting an unbelievable strain on neighboring countries and aid organizations. So, you might be asking, why is this happening if there's a truce? Well, this right here is the heart of the problem. It's a diplomatic deadlock. On one side, you've got Iran and Pakistan saying, hey, the truce has to cover everything, everywhere, or it's meaningless. But on the other side, the US and Israel see their actions in Lebanon as a totally separate security issue. And it's this fundamental disagreement that's the friction point, you know? It's what's generating all this heat. And that heat? Well, it's not staying local. It's sending a massive shockwave straight through the global energy markets. A regional conflict rarely ever stays regional, especially when it's happening right in the middle of the world's energy arteries. Because of all this instability, Iran has slapped strict quotas on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And the market's reaction? It's been swift and honestly brutal. Brent crude oil has shot up to $105 a barrel. A price like that sends tremors through the entire global economy. Which brings us to the bigger economic picture. The International Monetary Fund just put out a stark warning. They're saying that the path to a so-called soft landing for the global economy is becoming, and I'm quoting here, increasingly narrow. Think about it. High energy costs are a huge threat, and they could literally choke off industrial production, especially in places like Asia and Europe. You know, when energy prices spike, the pain doesn't just stop at the pump. An energy shock mixed with geopolitical chaos, that is a toxic cocktail for the financial world. That shockwave we talked about, it's now a financial contagion, spreading some serious anxiety all through the credit markets. And to really get why everyone's so anxious, you have to understand the bigger picture. The world is currently sitting on a mind-boggling $315 trillion in debt. A system carrying that much weight is incredibly sensitive to any kind of shock. And that sensitivity is showing up as, quote, deep investor anxiety. This isn't just market chatter, folks. It's a real fear that this sustained instability in one region could have serious long-term consequences for the entire world's financial health. This slide, right here, it perfectly lays out the specific pressure points. So let's just walk through it. First, the 10-year Treasury yield is high, which basically means borrowing money is more expensive for everyone. Second, we're seeing a flood of investors trying to pull their money out of private credit funds. Third, nobody knows who's going to be leading the U.S. Federal Reserve. And get this, the relatively low unemployment rate is actually adding to the problem because it makes it harder for the Fed to cut interest rates. It is a perfect storm of financial stress. So, all of this is happening, and at the same time, there's this other massive demanding thing going on in the background. Let's pivot for a second over to the tech world. Because there's a long-term infrastructural strain that's adding a totally different kind of pressure to the system. AI's absolutely insatiable appetite. We are now officially in the era of agentic AI. These are AIs that can actually go out and perform complex tasks on their own. The potential is, of course, immense, but the resources needed to power this revolution are just astronomical. And they are colliding head-on with all the instabilities we've just been talking about. I mean, just look at the money being thrown around here. The world's biggest cloud providers are upping your spending by an unbelievable 71% in just 1 year to $650 billion. This is a frantic, all out race to build the infrastructure of tomorrow.
But here's the catch. Here is the critical vulnerability. This massive AI expansion is slamming right into a physical power ceiling. The energy demand just from AI data centers is projected to hit 96 gigawatts. That's more energy than many countries use. And this is where it collides with our other crises: higher energy cost, strained supply chains for everything from chips to helium, not to mention the immense amount of water needed to cool these places. So, what happens when you throw together geopolitical shocks, volatile energy, and a resource hungry tech boom? What you get is a permanent rewiring of the very arteries of global trade, our supply chains.
And the people in the logistics industry, their response has been pretty clear. Faced with constant disruptions, a huge 72% of trade professionals are now turning to AI-driven networks to manage all this chaos. Kind of ironic, right? They're using the very same technology that's straining our systems to try and make them stronger. And this leads to a really crucial point, a fundamental shift in thinking. For decades, we've lived by just-in-time manufacturing, where efficiency was everything. Now we're moving to a just-in-case strategy. This new model is all about resilience, building up inventory, having backup routes. It's safer, for sure, but it also acts like a permanent tax on global trade, and that makes everything more expensive for all of us. Which really leaves us with one final massive question. This whole briefing has shown how one little spark in one corner of the globe can start a fire that rips through our energy, financial, tech, and trade systems. Our world has never, ever been more interconnected. So, is that our greatest strength, or is it our fatal flaw?
It really is the butterfly effect on a global scale, isn't it? A tiny flutter in one system creates a hurricane in another. And the great challenge of 2026, and probably for years to come, is figuring out how to manage the storms that our own interconnectedness creates. Thanks for tuning in to this special briefing.